Hey guys, my name's Crystal Kenny, and I'm in love with creating. All things artistic and imagination involved. I'm an American girl who chased her creative dreams all the way to Paris, France, making a living using photography. This podcast takes you inside the stories of all the artsy folks I've met along the way and gives you that extra push to discover your creative gifts. The desire to create is deeply inside each and every one of us, and I give you the tools and inspiration to find a new way of living a more creative life. This is La Vie Creative, the podcast. Claudine Hemingway is a descendant of famed writer Ernest Hemingway. We bumped into each other at a party and decided to team up and dive deep into French history, but with a twist, by bringing a spotlight to those lesser-known creatives in France. This is History with a Hemingway. Welcome back to Paris History, Avec, Hemingway. I'm back with Claudine, and today we are talking about love in the Orsay. Now, if you've ever visited the Musée d'Orsay, you know it's easy to fall in love with, but I have a feeling we're going to be talking about some of the romantic artwork you can find there to continue celebrating February. So I'll let Claudine take it from here.
Yes, you're very right. It is easy to fall in love with the Musée d'Orsay, but it is interesting. We just did for Valentine's Day, we did Love in the Louvre. And so I thought, why not do one about some of the stuff that's in the Orsay? But it is kind of funny. There's not as much in the Orsay that depicts love as you would think, as there's just hundreds and hundreds in the Louvre. But I found some good ones anyway.
I'm happy to hear that because we love love. Who doesn't love love?
Exactly. Well, it would be pretty funny if I was like, here's the episode. Now we only found one painting.
There is no love in the Orsay.
No love. But the first one, and these are all kind of, every one of these is kind of a little bit different version of love. The very first one is one that I absolutely have to visit every single time I'm there. You can also see this piece at the Musée Rodin, and it is about our very favorite Camille Claudel. And she, as you know, we have done an episode about her. It was episode 51, so it was quite a while ago. But it was one that still to this day, her life, and every time I see any of her art or her picture, it just kind of haunts me because she was such a beautiful artist and such a tragic story. But this one is about the relationship between Camille and Rodin, and she at the very end of their relationship, she really wanted to marry him, and he said no because he was with Rose, who he ended up marrying right at the very end of his life. And in 1892, they ended their relationship, but her feelings for him were still there, and it was maybe, if you look back on it now, if you watch the movie that they did, it was maybe a little on the obsessive side. It might, that period of their life could be a Lifetime movie. But in 1895, the French government commissioned her to do a piece and for the state. And so she started working on it. And usually a lot of times when the government and the state would commission these things, they wouldn't say, they would say, we want this artist to do this painting for this church or for this building, but they're never usually like, we want it to be this. So she was asked to create this piece. And so she started working on it. And as it started coming together and she shared it, everybody completely freaked out because it is called l'âge mûr, which is the middle age. And it is one of the most haunting, beautiful, sad sculptures you've ever seen. It depicts an older woman and is wrapping her arms around a man in front of her. She is very old. She looks, almost skeletal. She has her arms around him, and she is pulling him away. And behind him, on her knees, is another woman, and she's reaching up towards the older couple, towards the man, as he reaches his hand back, like he's reaching to her. And this younger woman is like looking up, like on her knees, like pleading. I mean, it's absolutely incredible. It's so beautiful. The reason why everybody freaked out was because it's basically the little trio that is the Rodin, Camille, and Rose little throuple, I guess we'll call it. But they weren't really a throuple because she, of course, Rose didn't really want Camille anywhere with them. And this was after they broke up. So when the state saw it and Rodin saw it and he heard about it, he was livid and was just like so upset and was like, this cannot be shown. This is ridiculous. And so the government, because they didn't want to tick Rodin off, were like rescinded the commission, but it still ended up being put together. The original version, there's some other little pieces of it that she did that shows the man and woman a little bit different. Once she did it, so he's reaching back and she's reaching up towards him. It's just it's hauntingly beautiful, and it's in the Orsay. It moves a lot of times. Sometimes it's at one end of the southern side of the upper terrace, but it's absolutely beautiful. And there is a version in the Rodin and the version at the Camille Claudel Museum that I can't wait to go check out.
I like that they were in that unwanted throuple. That's like,
Yeah. We're trying to bring it to current times here. But it's so sad. And I mean, you look at him and he's like reaching back, like he still wants to be with her. And then Rose, the, old lady of the three, is like pulling him away, like, no, you can't go with her. And I mean, we all know the story of how Camille's life ended. And if you don't know that, definitely check out that episode we did last year, to hear it. And it is sad, and her story will stay with you for the rest of your life.
for sure. Yeah, that one was really good.
It was so sad. Another one that is I'd love to go down and see was painted by Gustave Moreau. And Gustave Moreau was a symbolist painter, and he has a fantastic small museum that's in Paris in the Ninth that has one of the greatest staircases you've ever seen. But this painting was painted in 1865, and it's called Orphée, and it tells the story of Orphe, who was in the poem of the Metamorphosis by Ovid, which was written in 8 AD. A lot of the art, especially in the Louvre, you will see this on the plaques a lot of the times. You'll see where it says Ovid's Metamorphosis. It is basically 250 stories of Greek mythology. Psyche and Cupid are in there, tons and tons of stories. So you'll see this kind of come up a lot. But what's really cool about this one was Orpheus was the son of Apollo and the muse Calliope, and she was the muse of musicians. And so he was this very talented musician and poet and could basically charm anybody. But it was the followers of Dionysus, which was also Bacchus, that basically ripped his body to shreds.
Oh my God, love.
Yeah. So in the painting, Moreau has his head on this, sitting on a lyre, and so the lyre was like a harp. And so then he has this young girl that's holding this harp, basically looking at his head. But when you really look at it, you might think it looks a little bit more familiar. So he painted this so the background was kind of very Da Vinci, with like the mountains. Da Vinci always added kind of those Italian mountains in the background. So it's this beautiful scene of such a barbaric act. It was exhibited at the Salon of 1866, and it was purchased by the state for the Musée de Luxembourg, who at the time, the Musée de Luxembourg was the Museum of Living Artists. You still have the Musée de Luxembourg now, which is where they do 2 different exhibits a year, and that's one they just had the Vivian Maier that we talked about. And then it eventually ended up coming over to the Louvre and then to the Orsay. But if you look closer at his face, it might look familiar because Moreau painted the face so it was the same face as Michelangelo's dying slaves that you see in the Louvre.
Oh my goodness, that's crazy.
Yeah, it's very cool. Right now, you could see normally you could see the Michelangelo 2 statues of the dying slaves in the Louvre, but they seem to be missing right now. They were created for the tomb of Pope Julius II, but that tomb never came to fruition. So instead, he gave 2 of the 6 statues to Roberto Strozzi, who gave them to King Francois I of France, and it eventually ended up in their final home there at the Louvre. But he is just like, one of them is like the dying slave that they use on there was this young and he's very handsome. He thought to be, like he was asleep, but it almost looks like, maybe he's in a euphoric state, we'll call it.
Oh, you see.
But they were put into the petty gallery at the Louvre during COVID for this exhibit they did. And then they were supposed to move back in the fall of last year to their spot in the Louvre in the Salle de Michel-Ange. And they have this, like, they've always been sitting there, and then it has like this kind of metal, like, short railing, like a foot off the ground. And that railing was there in the fall, and then 2 days later the railing was gone, and then there was the plaque that said, these have been moved because it's the only Michelangelos you'll see in the Louvre. So a lot of people come there looking for it. And there's a sign saying, hey, these were at this exhibit. They'll be back in the fall. That sign was still there in January, which is how things seem to work in France and the Louvre. But then one day I came in there and the little barrier was gone.
What?
So we don't know where they went to. I don't know. I've even talked to my friend that's, pretty high up there at the Louvre. He says that he hasn't heard where they went to either. So it's a missing.
Somebody stole them.
Somebody stole. Yeah. They're pretty big. I don't know how anybody get out of there with those. But it is, you never know. But I love that when you see this painting, it's really cool to see that. And then, and the way she's like looking down at him, and it's just this beautiful image. And then I love how it just ties everything together.
I want to go look at all these again because I've kind of forgotten which one's which.
I'll put them all on my website.
Yes.
So you can see all the photos.
Yes.
The next one is another woman we have talked about. We talked about her and her, talking about another throuple here again. So Claude Monet and his first wife, Camille Dantelot, she, was a subject of many of his paintings. She was a model for him. She was the one that, we did the episode. It was the ladies of Monet, because there was Camille and then Alice who came in and became his second wife later. But he used her as a model for Les Femmes au Jardin and Les Déjeuners sur l'Herbe. If you look closely at the women in that painting, all of them are Camille. So he used her image to, be the face of all three of these models. She also sat for Renoir and Manet, and Manet painted, his friends, the Monets, quite a few times. In 1870, they married after a lot of his family was not pleased about that. And in 1878, she lived to be 200 years old. No, in 1878, they had their second son, Michael. And at that time, Camille also, they think during her pregnancy, she developed cancer. And so she, a year later after Michael was born, she died. As Monet was sitting there watching, and he was just completely in love with Camille, but also had his, side piece that now moved in with them. And then she also helped take care of her. But as he watched her slip away, he said, I can't help myself watching her tragic temples change, and mechanically searching for the sequence of the changing shades with death brings.
Oh, romance.
Yeah, so he watched her like go from like blue to yellow to gray, as she died. And he said he couldn't help himself but pick up his canvas and paint her. It's when you see the painting, it's, it just looks like she's just underneath this like layers and layers of veils. And it's so sad and tragic. And just watching her, thinking of him watching her, he painted this as she died instead of like from memory or anything like that. Alice, who was the one that he brought in, that lived with them, and she was taking care of Camille as she died. If you remember from that episode, Alice is the one that right after Camille died, she said, burn everything, and basically wiped every reminder of Camille out of their home and their life.
Ugh.
She was
Ugh,
lovely.
these women.
Yeah. Another one that I love to see, and it's on the northern side of the upper terrace. It's one that maybe a lot of people might not stop. But if people go to Orsay and they go straight up to go see the Impressionists, which is fantastic. It's what everybody should do. But if you have time, make sure to go walk through, the lower levels in the upper gallery. I think a lot of people miss the upper galleries just because they either go straight to the top and come down and see all the statues, but there's this really beautiful statue called Oudep and Calon, and it's by Jean Baptiste Hughes. And it was created in 1885, and it's a story of the love between a child and a parent. It basically depicts, they said it's here we are under the olive trees of Calon in the first scene. Set me on a rock, said Oedipe, and look after your blind father. So it's this beautiful, beautiful sculpture, and he is there, and you could kind of tell by the vacant look on his face that he's blind, and his daughter is sitting there next to him, and like just talking to him, and taking care of him. It's this really, really beautiful piece. And it's always just another one of those. I think that maybe the Orsay, from the ones we've talked about, it's more like a haunting love.
Yeah, I was going to say, these are some different loves, that's for sure.
Yeah, but now we're going to change that, because now we're going to talk about one of the largest paintings in the Orsay, that is called the Roman Decadence, or some call it the Roman Orgy.
Okay. Romance.
Yeah, so this one's by Thomas Couture, and it is a very huge painting. It's basically kind of in the transept of the Orsay, right there in the very center of it. Kind of once you walk in and you go through the first part of sculptures, onto the right, you see this huge painting. Thomas Couture wanted to bring back kind of the revival of the French painting. This is painted in 1847, so this is after more unrest and other revolutions that were going on, and France was starting to turn into like the industrial revolution and industrial time of France. And so he kind of wanted to be like, hey, remember when we used to do these things, and remember, when we liked culture and paintings and stuff. So he did this amazing painting, with a lot of Greek style and Renaissance. This was after the Romantic era, which you'll hear more about next week. But is basically kind of a scene of debauchery, but it is an amazing, amazing painting. In the very center of it, you have all these figures that look like, there's women with their tops off. There's, just basically you could tell that they are drunk. They are dancing in the center. They just look like they're having a great time. On the far left of it, you see underneath a Greek sculpture, a man sitting there, and he just looks like, he's the one that, comes to the party, and he's all sad because he doesn't have any friends, and he's looking down at the ground like, I don't want to be here. And then on the right side, you have two men that are, completely covered in, clothing, and they're looking back like with this judgment, like, what in the heck is going on here? But it's really, I mean, it has so much that you could look at and take in. In the very center of it, there's two couples. The couple on the left, she looks really bored, and the guy is like holding over his vessel, his chalice, and the other woman is giving, filling up his chalice, while the gentleman below her is like wrapped around her waist. And so you could see, it's like, is this the end of the party? And they're just like, ugh, we're tired of this. But the whole thing is pretty amazing, because it is a mix of, current, even though they're all dressed, a lot of them are dressed in what you would see in like ancient Greek times, but the scene itself is more modern. And then you have it behind this backdrop of what is almost this natural frame of these, columns and tall, sculpted marble statues that are kind of looking down. So it's like the, ancient times looking down on the current times. And so it's fascinating to look at it and just to see all the different pieces. He was really inspired by Ingres with, the Grand Odalisque and all of these different, so you can see these bodies, very reminiscent of others paintings you've seen, and it's really really interesting. But it is called, a lot of people, it is known as the Roman orgy. And so, and then there's even like there's like a group in the back corner where somebody's like the gentleman's holding up like what looks like a laurel wreath, and the women below are dancing, and it always reminds me of the Carpeau sculpture that he did on the outside of the opera, that the original is now inside the Orsay. That when that appeared outside the Opera Garnier, somebody came around one night and threw black ink on it because it was so shocking to see. We've talked about this a lot of times in the different paintings, like Manet with Olympia, of like, you only showed nakedness when it was in, biblical or allegorical, but it never should just be, modern. And this painting was done 20 years before Olympia was done.
That's crazy. And people were so upset by it, they're literally throwing paint on it.
Oh, yeah, they were always kind of upset about it.
Yeah.
About everything. But it is really interesting. Couture was also, he ended up being one of the teachers of Manet. And also that is how Manet met Bert Morisot. He also did all of the paintings that is in the beautiful, the Saint Eustache Church in the the Chapel of the Virgin. He did all those paintings in there, which are really beautiful. But he's kind of more known as being, the short time teacher of Manet. And, that's how he met Morisot, who is our next one, that Berthe Morisot, which we've also done a whole episode about. She did this beautiful painting called The Cradle in 1872. It's probably one of her most popular paintings. It was of her sister, Edme, and her sister's daughter, Blanche. She's in this little crib sleeping. It was the first one she did of motherhood, which is, of course, basically what she would do after she had her daughter, Julie. We basically saw Julie grow up. And there is an amazing exhibit about Julie Manet at the Marmottan Monet until I think March 20th. So if you're going to Paris before March 20th, do please go and see that. It's fantastic. But this was shown at the 1847 exhibit of Impressionism. No one bought it, so she kept it in her family. In 1930, Blanche, who was the baby depicted in the painting, ended up giving it to the Louvre. And then, of course, everything in 1986, all of those paintings made their way over to the Orsay. But it's this really, really beautiful painting. These ones they're in the Orsay at all times. So sometimes they move things around quite often in the Orsay. So sometimes it could be there on a Tuesday and you come back on a Thursday and it's someplace else. But their website, you sometimes could find, it'll tell you updated where it's been moved to, or you could try to ask somebody if you are going and there's something you really want to see. Send me a message and I could help you find it. Another painting that is on the lower level that some people might not have seen before is by Pierre Bonnard, and it is called A Man and a Woman, and it was painted around 1900. He was one of the founding members of the Les Nabis, which was inspired by Gauguin, and also the Japanese woodcut prints. It is a painting of Pierre and his wife, Marthe. And it's really interesting. They're both standing there nude. I thought, when I first saw the painting, I was like, that's interesting. But then when I looked up about the painting, was even more interesting. He is kind of in the front of the painting, and they're both nude. She's sitting on the bed. Marthe Boursin, his wife, was born on February 22nd, 1869. So pretty much, it's her birthday tomorrow. She started in Paris as working at an artificial flower making shop where she met Pierre. When she first met him, she introduced herself as Marthe de Melanier, that she was a descendant of Italian royalty. And she didn't tell him the truth until they got married. I mean, back then, it's not like he could Google it. I guess you just had to take your word for it.
No background checks back then.
Yeah, but she kind of is known to have gone a little bit crazy, and that he basically kind of disappeared from public because she had so many anxieties and was extremely jealous if he talked to anybody, because she kind of went through this really bad period. And then she died before him, a few years before him. But this, he used her quite often in some of his paintings as his model. But then later on, he didn't. She apparently left at some point, and they're not really sure where she went. But then she reappeared in his life like 6 years later. It's just a really interesting story that anytime that he would bring another model around, she would kind of get upset, which sounds a lot like our last uh, paintings we will do. But the next one that I just absolutely am enthralled by this one, and it also appeared at the same salon as the Roman orgy, and also was between that and this one, it was the most talked about pieces at the salon. It is by Auguste Clessinier, and it's called Woman Stung by a Snake. It was done 1847. And the two of them, as I said, were quite talked about. This one was even more because it is a marble sculpture of a woman. She is in a very sensual pose. She's kind of like withering, like laying there on her, moving over to her side a little. Her back is arched, which basically she appears to be in a moment of ecstasy, which is not completely why it shocked people. It was actually done, and the artist would say that this didn't happen, but they found out later that this is true. It was done with natural molding. So what they did was, it was kind of controversial in the 19th century. It was basically, they would take plaster molding and place it on the body. So you would get, it's literally, when you look at this sculpture, you're looking at her body. This isn't like an interpretation of her. This is her body. And if you look on the back of it, on the back of her upper thighs, you see cellulite dimples.
Whoa.
So, which is like, thank you, sister. We all have that.
Always have, always will.
Yeah, but it is like, it's he at the time, it appeared, and here it is along the Roman orgy, and everybody's kind of like, this whole country is going to hell in a handbasket. All of this sex is here at the salon, and so then they notice that there's these dimples, and it was really controversial to do that. Rodin also got in trouble because he did a sculpture of a man that people freaked out because it's so perfectly done and anatomically correct that people were like, he had to have done that from this man's body, which he said he didn't do either. Later, Auguste actually did another version of it that's a little bit larger, saying, "Hey guys, look, I could do this. I'm fine doing this without putting it on somebody's body." But this sculpture was done, and it was commissioned by for wealthy industrialist Alfred Musselman. He had requested this be done of his mistress that was quite well known at the time in Paris. They would call her Le Président, Apolline Sabatier. She was alive from 1822 to 1890. She lived just down the street from you at Place Pigalle. And she had this very famous salon. She was the muse of Baudelaire, all these different artists that used to come there. And she's a beautiful woman. She was also the lover of Sir Richard Wallace, of the Wallace Fountain fame. He was in 1860, which is when he was creating, had this idea to create these fountains. And so I cannot find information about this, of who the likeness of the Richard Wallace fountains, the four women. But I've seen paintings of Sabatier, and I've seen the fountain. I'm going to do more investigation on it because I think it's her.
Oh, well, keep us updated.
Yes, I'll do some more investigation. But so that would be pretty cool if that was the same one. But Théophile Gautier, when he saw this sculpture, he said it was pure orgasmic delirium. The disheveled Maynard tumbles at the feet of Bacchus, because they also think it was, one of these followers of Bacchus, who was the father of liberty and joy, a powerful spasm of happiness. is this sculpture. And really is really gorgeous. And I'll have pictures of all of these on my website, ClaudineHemingway.com. But the snake is this tiny snake that's just wrapped around her wrist. So it's not like there's this, it's not like there's this huge snake that you would think of. It almost just like looks like a bracelet. I have a gold bracelet my grandma gave me that you wrap around your wrist that looks like a snake. I'll have to wear it the next time and then maybe, lay there and model it in the Orsay.
Yeah, we have to make a plaster casing of you.
Oh, I don't know about that. But it was, attacked for its indecency. And it's just really funny when you see the art and like the things they freaked out about then. But then France is actually so much more liberal to Americans. Like Americans are so puritanical when it comes to this stuff. But at the time, they freaked out about this stuff in France.
Yeah.
Yeah. But he tried to, silence his critics by saying, oh, no, I could do this. And there is a larger version of it that's in the Petit Palais. There is also another sculpture that's looks very reminiscent of this one that you could see in the Orsay as well. Claysinger also did a bust of Rachel Felix, who we are going to talk about in a few weeks. And then he also did the statue in the Luxembourg of Louis de Savoie, who is one of the 20 illustrious women.
That's all coming together.
And then now we have another way to get them all together with some of our last ladies too. He married George Sand's daughter, Solange, and he did in the Saint-Sulpice, the Pietà that you see in Saint-Sulpice, he did that as well as the Monument to Chopin in the Père Lachaise.
Oh my goodness, they're all connected.
It all comes together. And our last one has to do with our very first podcast that we ever did 2 years ago. Oh yeah, 2 years ago, like right now.
Oh my goodness, time flies.
2-year anniversary. But it's Renoir's Dancers. And there's 3 of these paintings, 2 of them which are in the Orsay. They were commissioned in 1883 by the gallery owner, Paul Durand-Rouet. He wanted some paintings that depicted a scene from a ball. So Renoir came up with these 3 ideas. So they are Dance in the Country and Dance in the City. Those are the 2 in the Orsay. Then there is the Dance de Bougival, and that one is in Boston at the Museum of Fine Arts. But it's in the who's in the paintings that's so interesting and has our little tale of love. Of course, our very first podcast episode was about Suzanne Valadon, who was a model who also became an artist in her own right. And lately, she is starting to, there was some stuff at the Pompidou about her, and there's an upcoming exhibition at the Musée de Luxembourg where it's going to have some of her paintings, and some of our paintings from our good friend Camille of Jacqueline Marval will also be there, and that opens in like 2 weeks in March.
Oh my goodness, that's so cool.
I know. So excited for Camille. But Suzanne Valadon, she modeled for Renoir from the time that she was 17 to 22. And while she was modeling for him, she was, of course, soaking up everything that he was doing and watching him. And she would go home at night and paint. The 2 were very close. They were so close that when she became pregnant, a lot of people thought that maybe it was a child of Renoir, but it was not. But even though we're still not completely sure who the father actually was, he had a studio that's just down the street around the corner from you, Crystal, on Rue de Orchamps, which is also where our other gal, Dalida, lived. She was a frequent visitor, and she modeled for all 3 of these paintings until Renoir's partner, Eileen Cherigot, at the time got so sick and tired of this woman coming into his studio. And she was, the talk of the town was that Renoir got her pregnant, and Eileen just could not take it anymore. And she walked in there one day and she saw the one painting of the Dance in the Country and attacked it, scraped up the face. And so Renoir had to redo it. So all 3 of these paintings once were Suzanne, and now only 2, the Country and Bougival, are Suzanne. And the one that's, the city is her. The Country is now Eileen. And that is the one that, those are, hanging in the Orsay. They had met in 1880 when she was a seamstress on Rue Saint Georges, which was close to where he lived. And they finally got married in 1890. I love that some of these artists, like, Rodin and Renoir, were like, they were just keeping them on the, keeping them happy. And then finally, at the end of, towards the end of their life, they married him. The country dance is, very casual. It's under this chestnut tree. The man that is in the country and the city one was his friend Paul Lotte. He is basically, in all three of them, the men's faces are somewhat hidden, so you don't get to see their full face. They weren't the important part there. On the country dance, she's wearing a straw hat and she's smiling. She looks very happy. The city one is, I think, the one that's just really is beautiful. It's Suzanne, of course, and she's pregnant at the time, but you just see her from the back. So you see the back, and she's got this beautiful white dress that just has like layers and layers of, of ruffles on it. It's very stoic and very controlled. It's a very society, the perfect society with the gloves, and, everybody has to be doing the right thing. The Bougival is still a village 10 miles from Paris. And at the time, a lot of the Impressionists were out there. This is where a lot of them would paint. And they are dancing in a cafe, and Suzanne Valadon, and some people think it's also Lotte, but he does look a little bit different. So he's probably Alphonse Fornés, who was also in Renoir's Luncheon of the Boating Party. So it all, they use all these people over and over. She, in that one, is wearing a red bonnet. And in the background, there's tons of people sitting. It's in the middle of a cafe. So you definitely see the difference if you look at all three of them. And I'll put all three pictures on my website. If you look at all three of them side by side, they're, all taking place at the same time. But you could definitely see the different layers of society. And I mean, I think the one that's the Bougival, the one that's in Boston, is probably the one that looks like the most fun.
I want to look at your website and listen to this podcast and look at all this art to go along with what we just talked about.
I know. Well, hopefully, if you're listening to this, and I know a lot of people love to listen to it when they're driving or when they're on a walk. But if you are on your computer when you're listening to this, just pull my website up at the same time, and that way I'll put them all on in order, so you could just scroll through and see them. And I also will put them on my Instagram.
I think is a fantastic idea. And we hope you guys enjoyed this episode. Make sure you head over to ClaudineHemingway.com for more information and reach out to Claudine. We love hearing from you. We love having you as listeners. And please tune in next week.
Thank you for listening to Paris History Avec a Hemingway. If you want to find out some more, you could always find me on my Instagram page, Claudine Bleu Blanc Rouge, and that's BLEU, as in the French way to spell it. And each day I post a daily history lesson about a person or a place or something in Paris, or it's lots of fun facts. And then also at ClaudineHemingway.com, where you can also sign up for my newsletter there.